I'd like to speak on the archetype of the victim in this episode. It's something that is at the core of our healing journey, if you want to call it that, or our liberation journey, is understanding what the victim in us wants, needs, and does. And also how we can no longer have it lead our decisions and actions. The victim is very much connected to all of us in this age. We might experience it in many ways. I want to tell you about my story as the victim. I mean, even when we think of that word, when we talk about victims of atrocities, victims of war, victims of abuse, we're using this word to describe what happens when the individual is caught in a situation where harm is put upon them. And for good reason, so we can identify who is harmed and know that they need help. They need the community to come in and support them, tend to their wounds, make sure that they are cared for. The victim is necessary to be called the victim because of this, because they are in a situation where they might be even at risk of death. But the victim is also, therefore, a state of helplessness in some way, needing the external to support them, needing community, needing tending to. And this is where we can get this tendency of ourselves to stay in a state of victimhood as a means to feel like we aren't in control, feel helpless, hopeless, and in need of something else to take care of us, save us, fix us, heal us. And so whilst it's so important to have the state of victimhood recognized as something in society and something important that needs our attention, to remain in a state of victimhood as a collective or as an individual can have really detrimental means. Because if everyone is a victim, or if we cannot leave the state of victimhood, then we cannot help ourselves, we cannot build, we feel unable to strengthen, to feel healed, whole, and in control. And this is the nuance that I want to share today in this episode and take you on this journey with me to understanding the victim a little bit deeper. Because there is the other state that waits at the end of the cycle of victimhood upon its completion, and that is the creator that has integrated their wounds and no longer uses them as a reason to feel out of control or hopeless or helpless, but uses their wounds and scars as lessons and wisdom, and can use them as wisdom for others and for themselves. But before we try and make this black and white or condemn certain ways of being, as I've said already, and I will reinforce this point again, There is a reason for every archetype that we see expressed in reality, and I strongly believe that. And for that reason, there is a very strong reason why we need the victim, especially in this age, to reveal to us the journey of becoming whole, or remembering we are whole, really, and coming home to ourselves. So, when we experience the state of being a victim, it is important that we experience it fully. And that doesn't mean that we use this state of being a victim as a means to gain, but we recognize where we have been a victim. And so, let me put this in the context of my own story. I experienced a lot of nuanced childhood traumas, and many ways in relationships growing up I experienced a lack of interdependent relational experiences that felt fully healthy. And in many ways, I inherited trauma from family that hadn't resolved a lot of their wounds from many things, including poverty, including fear of scarcity. And let me put this in the context of wealth and money as an example of many different patterns that I have tended to. I experienced a lot of fear around losing money and a need to be financially stable, financially abundant. And this came up so much in my life of get a good job, make sure that you are earning a lot of money, make sure that you have good accolades, good qualifications, that you are always saving, always frugal, never thinking about ways in which you could work less, always work more, work harder. You must use your time to stay busy, productive, to produce, to receive as much wealth, because that is your stability. And it left me with a pattern of feeling like money was never really mine to have. Always something I had to chase after, and something that I couldn't really ever get a grip on, because whenever it came in, it was always going out to a bill or to a situation. And I have spent times of my life when I've had very little, and my bank number has gone to 0. And in those situations, I experienced a lot of victimhood of, why me? Why does everyone else get nice things, have the good job, and why do I not have this or that or the other? And I couldn't celebrate receiving money because I knew that, or the belief was there, well, it's going to go out to all of these things, and I don't actually have any money for myself. And so this continued, and it was a cycle for me of scarcity that wasn't even mine to begin with, but something that I'd inherited. And so I felt many ways like a victim, like that the belief wasn't mine to start with, and that it was somebody else's fault that I felt this way. It was somebody else's fault that I was in this situation, or it was my fault and I blamed myself and spiraled in that self-blame and self-shame. So there are many ways that we can experience victimhood: in betrayals, in relationships, in rejections, in losing a job, in losing money, in not achieving something. And in a wider perspective, we can feel like the world is happening to us. And that's why I've thought of this topic right now, because I feel like it's very useful to look upon the world right now and see the ways in which the world is shifting so deeply and rapidly right now. And so much is going on that feels out of control. Governments and leaders, quote-unquote leaders, I mean, I don't really want to call them that because what they're doing isn't leading, but they are acting in a way that does not benefit humanity at all, that does not unite humanity or care for human beings. It is purely profit-driven, and we are, as a collective, either consciously or subconsciously feeling that. These quote-unquote leaders are inciting war, violence, and creating deeply destructive economic decisions, and we are feeling that. And it's very easy to feel a victim of all of those things. And then there are the real victims of war. And when we are watching that, we are feeling that pain of them, because we are all connected. And it's really important, I feel, in this situation to recognize that if we are not directly a part of that, and we are witnessing it, but we are in a place of stability in some form of the other. We are not in those war zones, or we are not right now in a direct way suffering from famine or poverty or deep instability, that we have a duty to strengthen our consciousness, to not be the victim ourselves, because it's very easy to look at the world and take on the victimhood, and to not just rage and grieve the actions of these humans that have created this, but to feel hopeless and helpless against it. That is when it becomes very, very dangerous and very destructive. Because if these leaders are doing this by intention, then this is exactly what they want us to feel. And if they're not doing it by intention, then we are not helping humanity step away from this kind of behavior by just being hopeless and helpless ourselves. We are the ones that are invited to step out of that way of consciousness. And the way we do that is by recognizing our own strength and power in the situation. So take the example of being in a situation with money, like I was just sharing about. And how I stepped out of that victimhood was recognizing that, firstly, my reality is very much based on what I focus on. Where my attention goes is where energy flows, and you might have heard that. But let me explain what that means a bit deeper. It means that if you go outside and you look for yellow cars, you will find yellow cars, because your consciousness is always seeking to reflect the reality of your mind the reality outside is consciously reflecting the reality of your mind. And so as you seek things in the world, so you will find them. And so if we are seeking problems and experiences of victimhood, we will find them eventually. Even in the most blissful and privileged of lives, we will find them. And we can experience this through our own triumphs and victories. If we are still in a mode of feeling down about ourselves, we can't celebrate them fully. And I learned this when I started to reap the rewards of my business and my work, and I started to make more money, and I was still in the same mentality when it came to looking at that money. I was afraid to open my bank account. I was afraid to spend money on my bills, on my food every month. And I thought, what does this mean? Because I have now got plenty of money to spend and I'm still in this mindset. So it didn't ever go away until I addressed that mentality of feeling victim to my money. And what that meant was realizing that my attention to the problem of money was creating the problem, or was creating the experience of having a problem with it every time, finding a problem even when there wasn't one. And this is when the somatic portion comes in, because this is not just something that you can decide and it changes. To me, this is then deeply assessing where the body is. When I looked at my bank account, what was happening in my body? Well, I was tense. I was frozen. I would procrastinate paying things. And as I talked about in the last episode, we can recognize this as a program that the body is in to protect us. That the body has only known scarcity around money and wealth. And so the body's trying to survive. So its way of doing that is to not address money and using money and spending money as a way to hold onto it, to keep it, to hide from it, just to protect itself, because money is a very much survival thing. You know, we pay our food, our shelter, our water with money. And so just saying, oh, well, don't believe that money is scarce, just believe it's abundant, was not enough. I had to address that freeze mode that I felt with it and move my body through that freeze response every time it came up. And this is what I take a lot of the women through that I work with, is that repatterning. And when you do that, you start to feel like you can give it, not necessarily let it go, but give it. And it's not from a place of I'm giving it so I can get something back. No, that's still the same response, really. It's I can give it and I don't even have a thought about whether it's coming back. Wow, now that's what we get to. And it feels very different, because we're not holding on to anything. We're just letting everything pour out of us. Imagine the tree leaving fruit on the ground. It does not imagine something's coming back to it. It doesn't try and hold on to the fruit for as long as possible. And then only when it's got a certain amount of things does it let the fruit go. No, it just lets the fruit go because it knows that it will have nutrients, it will have all that it needs even without the fruit. And that's the mindset that we become a part of. I always watch my baby daughter and the way that she navigates the world, because she is an unprogrammed human, as much as an unprogrammed human as we can get. And she knows that she is in the present all the time. And so she just attends to the present. And that's where we are when we aren't in a state of wounding. When we're in a wounding pattern, or a special program in the body where we are surviving, we are playing out a past response over and over again, which is saying to us, we need to be this way, we need to play this pattern out because we don't know whether the present moment or the next moment is benign or malevolent. But if we aren't in that state of wounding, we are just present and we are open and curious and excited and in awe of the present. And so if you're not feeling that, then you're likely to be in this survival program. And in the survival program, we are holding on to something and we aren't able to give, which is paradoxically how we receive. And that's the beauty of the yin-yang dynamics of this reality. There's always these paradoxes. To give is to receive. How spectacular is that? And when we're really giving, we are receiving. It's not the same as giving and overgiving to please someone else, or to please the mechanisms of the universe. You'll have to excuse me tending to my baby daughter as I record this episode. You might have heard her just now, but to give in the other way I'm explaining is a very different thing to the overgiving that leaves you feeling drained, feeling like you've just put in so much effort that you've tried to wrangle the universe in some kind of way so that you could finally get what you need. It's really not that at all. It's being so attentive to what you have now and what you are in now, and being so present to it that the state of wanting more leaves you and you give. And when you do that, things come back tenfold. And there is a definite way to do this, to get to this place, and it involves somatically tending to those responses around your victimhood, whether it's a freeze or a fight or flight response. For me, like going back to this money example, which I feel like is a very clear one to use, I felt frozen, I felt afraid every time I opened an envelope that had a bill in it, or when I went to the supermarket and I was buying food, I was in a stress response. I noticed that in my body. And so the key to starting to realize, where are my patterns of holding, hiding, protecting, bracing, is to realize what those patterns feel like in the body. And then we might start to realize, this is where I'm still in victim mode. I still feel out of control with the world. I feel like the world is happening to me. And the world doesn't feel like a safe, abundant place. It feels worrisome, it feels threatening, it feels scary. And the really important thing here is that this journey is necessary, not just for ourselves, but for us as a collective, being able to build something better than we have right now, where we are creating more victims of war, poverty, famine, destruction, because victims create more victims, and the leaders, or the fake leaders, to be fair, are victims themselves. They feel like they don't have enough. That's why they're doing what they're doing, because they feel at loss and lost with their own reality, and they are holding on to money, status, wealth, and want more and more and more of it. And so they create more victims of their own behavior. And to break this cycle, we have to recognize that we are in this pattern, and that victimhood isn't something that we need to let lead us. It is a piece of our wisdom in this age, in this reality, that can show us where we don't trust, where we've lost trust along the way. Maybe in our generation, or maybe it was something that we were taught. We don't trust that. We don't trust those people, or we don't trust money, or we don't trust stability or security, or this land or this place. And we must notice in our bodies where we brace and hide and hold. And if you journey with me, or in the offerings that I have, because I have a bunch of free books, for example, How to Feel, Reprogramming the Body After Trauma is available on Kindle, and also my book Activating the Internal is a great way to start journeying through where your body is holding these responses and patterns, and saying we can't trust. I love the line from Alan Watts that actually you are trusting in something even if you're not trusting. You're just trusting that you can't trust. Sometimes I say that and people roll their eyes, but I think it's a great remembering, is that we're always trusting in something. Whether we're trusting that we can trust, or that we're trusting that we can't trust. That things will always fail us, that things will always be out of our control, that things are insecure or unstable. We are trusting in that. So why not trust that things are stable? And we can get there. The pattern, or the process of unraveling the victim, requires us to tend to the state of freeze in our body, or the fight or flight or flood response that I talk about in the last episode, and that will go into more detail in the next episode. These are really important for us. It's very easy to say, I don't know why I do that, or I can't do that because I feel this way, or I'm afraid to go there in my mind. I'm afraid to lose myself. I'm afraid that if I go to these places of tending to these stress responses, these stuck places in my mind, that I will, in unraveling them, I will lose myself. I spoke about this fear last time, and it's a very real fear. It's a fear of finally giving after having seemingly lost oneself in the past. And when we have deep trauma, we can feel a sense of unreality on the other side, a sense that our reality won't be the same again, and it won't. It won't be the same, because we will not be in a state of scarcity or fear anymore, in a part of ourselves that has always been that way, or maybe has been that way for a long time. So it's very real, but the courage to not be deterred by that thought. I'm afraid to lose myself. I'm afraid of the pain that might be brought up from doing this. I'm afraid there might be more of it, or I'm afraid that tending to the stuck feeling I have, or tending to the belief that I have around this thing, might end me in an even worse situation. That's very real. For me, it was with money. I felt like if I make more, if I'm more curious, playful, and present with money, that I'll end up in worse situations. But it's funny, in the way that we tend to ourselves and our bodies in the way that I've described, it's not that we just launch into rewiring our belief and just going with the new story. Like, for instance, I didn't start to suddenly spend lots and just not care about money and do whatever I wanted. No, in fact, I didn't ever change my behaviors or actions really around money. It was my intention that changed. My intention was no longer a fearful one. I still budgeted. I still was frugal. I still made sure I wasn't spending too much on myself because I was still building myself up. But I was no longer in a state of fear or stuckness or frozenness around money, because my body had been rewired and repatterned to no longer brace, hold, constrict, contract, hide from it. And funnily enough, when this happened, I started to receive so much. And I didn't start to give it away all of a sudden. But I was giving to myself because I wasn't in a pattern of scarcity in my being. If that makes sense. I wasn't cutting myself off from the connection I could have with the money that I had. Even if it was very little money. I was no longer in a relationship with it that felt like me and money were living in a house and I was avoiding being in the same room with it. And so that's the difference. So I will delve more into these topics as we go on. But I'll leave this episode here for now, reiterating that this is a really important journey that you can start today with the 2 books that I just mentioned that are available. They're available through my website, or I will leave them in the description. And you can check them out to start on this journey that is unraveling the victimhood within your consciousness, within the collective consciousness, and is so important at this time. I'll be going deeper into this and the masculine and feminine dynamics of this in later episodes. But for now, thank you for listening to this episode, and I will see you in the next episode.